TopMedTalk.
Nick Majerison here. Welcome to TopMedTalk. Time now to listen to the POCAPALOOZA. What's that? Well, POC, Perioperative Care. And then a palooza is an extravagant event or celebration of some kind. And that's what this was. We celebrated perioperative care and we took the message around the world in the wake of EBPOM Live from London 2020.
Now, we've journeyed across the globe to chat with friends about the state of perioperative care in their region and chatted with members of the International Board of Perioperative Medicine. And our next stop is in the Down Under, Australia and New Zealand, with none other than the father of perioperative medicine, a long-term friend of EBPOM and TopMedTalk, and his amazing colleagues there, Ross Carriage. Did I get it right, Ross?
Yeah, there's a loose connection with the facts there somewhere, I'm sure.
As usual, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Ross.
Okay, I'm an anaesthetist in Newcastle in Australia. Newcastle's a city, it's my hometown. It's a city 100 miles north of Sydney, a post-industrial city, you might say. And I'm an anaesthetist at the main hospital there, John Hunter Hospital, which is the sort of tertiary referral academic centre for northern New South Wales. And I'm nearing the end of my active career, probably.
Don't say it, Ross. You can't leave
Despite my apparent youth.
Yeah. Absolutely. Ross, you've had an interest in perioperative medicine for a very long time. Can you tell me what prompted you to get into this space? Was it even something that people were talking about when you kind of first were dabbling in it?
When I was a registrar, I did part of my training in England. When I was there, we had some particular challenges that in true Dunkirk spirit, the staff sat down and said, well, how are we going to deal with this? And part of the answer was reshuffling the way we got patients to the operating theatres and got them prepared for the operating theatres. And we only ran it for a couple of days. But at the time, I thought, this made such a difference. We should do that all the time. And I thought about it for the next 2-3 years. And then when I first got a consultant job, I was in a hospital that was going through a lot of changes and we were able to implement, plus a whole lot of other things that we put together. And that was the sort of the start of it. And other people have added on bits and pieces and it's just continued to grow. And I think the science is all very well, but sometimes just thinking of better ways of actually applying the science and organising services improves patient outcomes and gives a better experience and saves money as well. So good journey.
Win-win for everyone, for sure.
Yeah.
But there are parts of the world that have not been able to do this. And we are excited to announce during our POCAPALOOZA with EBPOM Global, raising money. We're hoping to raise £2,000 to support the African Perioperative Research Group, or APORG. So
it's a really exciting initiative. And what Bruce Pickard and others have done in Africa. And we've seen some of the really African-based research that's been done, and that the answers there are very different to what they will be anywhere else, and they've got to do their own research. But the more we can do to support them, the better.
Moving on, Australia and New Zealand, what is happening with perioperative care in your neck of the woods? Can you introduce us to your friends today?
Yeah, I've got some of the leading lights of perioperative medicine. Jill Van Acker, who's head of the Perioperative Special Interest Group. Vanessa Beavis, who is head of the Australian and New Zealand College of Anaesthetists. Jackie Close, who's a professor at the University of New South Wales and an ortho-geriatrician, one of the leading lights in working translational research in dementia in the perioperative space in particular. Dave Storey, who's an anaesthetist in Melbourne, professor at Melbourne University and head of the ANSCA Clinical Trials Network. And then Joel Simons, who's done some fantastic work developing training programs and education in perioperative medicine. Now, actually, Desiree, it's a funny thing. It's only occurred to me just thinking about this. When we have a big meeting in Australia, and New Zealand has a similar tradition, we always start by acknowledging the traditional owners, if you like, the First Nation peoples. Would sort of feel remiss if we didn't do that. In my case, it's the Awabakal and the Worimi nations of the traditional owners of the Newcastle area, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and particularly my friend and colleague, Surgeon Kelvin Kong, who's an emerging leader of the Worimi people. You'll be embarrassed about that. But In the circumstance, I've never thought about how we do this in a virtual thing, but we should do that for all Australia. And Vanessa, could I ask you to do the similar acknowledgement for New Zealand?
I'd be happy to. No mai, haere mai. ANZCA acknowledges and respects Ngā iwi Māori as the tangata whenua of Aotearoa New Zealand and is committed to upholding the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, fostering the college's relationship with Māori, supporting Māori fellows and trainees, and striving to improve the health and well-being of Māori. Kia ora tātou.
Amazing.
Yeah. New Zealand has a very interesting history. They actually started in 1840 with the Treaty of Waitangi, and that's an issue that Australia's yet to catch up with, but that's a long story.
Thank you both for sharing that.
Anyway, let's talk about perioperative medicine, and it's a great pleasure now to introduce Jill Van Acker, who's the chair of the Australian and New Zealand Perioperative Special Interest Group. Jill's an anaesthetist in Canberra, our national capital. I'm not sure whether that would be good or bad for her, but she has to deal with all the politicians when they get sick.
Oh, goodness. Hi, Jill. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ross, for the kind introduction. I would also like to thank the APORG Organising Committee for giving us a little spot in your fabulous meeting. I've thoroughly enjoyed the meeting so far and really am in awe of what the Organising Committee has achieved during these tough times. As mentioned by Ross, I'm an anaesthetist and love anaesthesia. Perioperative care is really my passion. The Perioperative Medicine Special Interest Group, as a way of background, is a multidisciplinary, multi-specialty group that was founded by our current college president, Dr. Vanessa Beavers, back in 2009. So quite progressive, I would say. I guess it's a little bit like the Centre of Perioperative Care in the UK, in that it includes multiple groups, but for organisational purposes, it's auspiced by the College of Anaesthetists. One of its aims was to bring together like-minded clinicians from different specialties with a passion for perioperative care and improving the perioperative patient journey. We take great pride in the fact that both our members and meeting delegates come from a range of specialties, including but not limited to anaesthesia, geriatric medicine, internal medicine, intensive care medicine, and surgery. The central idea has always been about improving perioperative patient outcomes through teamwork and collaboration. The beauty of it is that it encourages us clinicians to come out of our single specialty silos, open our minds and learn from and collaborate with our colleagues from different disciplines while making a difference to our patients. The perioperative SIG has over the years played a pivotal role in increasing awareness of the importance of perioperative care in Australia and New Zealand and bringing the different colleges and societies together to start on that journey of collaboration to improve perioperative care on a national level. One of its other main functions, of course, is the organisation of our annual scientific meeting. It really first started back in 2012 when it was a smallish meeting in Byron Bay, but since then it's actually grown and evolved very rapidly. Over the past couple of years, we've recorded more than 500 delegates each year. We were kind of looking forward to welcoming Dr. David Selwyn and Dr. Jagdeep Desi from CPOC UK to the Gold Coast this year, but obviously due to COVID-19, this has had to be cancelled. However, I am pleased to announce that the Perioperative Medicine SIG exec has decided to follow EPCOM 2020 and run a virtual meeting later this year, which is due to take place on the 10th of October. I mean, the quality of the virtual EPCOM meeting is so fabulous. I hope that we can learn from this excellent meeting and steal some ideas.
We'll gladly share. It's all good. Now, it's great. We also have a lot of the content that you guys have published throughout the year on TopMedTalk. We collaborated a couple years ago with providing the content from the meeting, and anywhere in the world can listen to what you guys have done in the past. So be sure to check that out on TopMedTalk, the Perioperative SIG.
Thank you.
About it. Well, Ross, our next guest, we are going to be talking to
our president of the Australian New Zealand College of Anaesthetists, Vanessa Beavers. Vanessa is based in Auckland in New Zealand. She's very wisely, after working very hard as Director of Anaesthesia at Auckland for many years, decided to resign from that position so she can focus on being the President of the College, which I think was a pretty smart move, Vanessa, but it's not the first smart move Vanessa's made.
So, Perioperative Medicine, 2009.
That was when we set up the special interest group. It wasn't universally accepted that this was necessarily something that everybody was wanting to embrace. And so my interest started not in the dark ages like Ross Kerridge, but in about 2003 or 2004, when I was a member of a task force, which I might add Ross was part of as well, looking at the position and the role that the college could play in what was then a very undefined subject or area called perioperative medicine, perioperative care, which we worked on and then the special interest group, and now here we are today.
It's great. You guys have been leaders in this space. You know, some people may say that perioperative medicine and this idea of looking at the whole picture is kind of a trendy thing, but it doesn't seem to be that way for you guys at all.
If it's trendy, that's a good thing. Its time has come. Its time is now.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's about time too, given the desperate need for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The reason we need to do it is because we need good long-term results for patients, better than we had before, and we need to help them to live longer and to feel well for longer. And so the only way you can do that is if you have great collaboration between specialties, and not only medical specialties, but also our allied health colleagues, nursing, everywhere. Everybody needs to apply their great skills and expertise and training to that particular patient that you're looking after. It also must start and end in primary care. And so you can argue about exactly where it starts and where it stops, but there's no doubt that it begins and ends wherever it is with the primary care physician who's looking after the patient. So there has to be good collaboration, good teamwork, and everybody needs to be involved with it. If you start having groups working in silos, we all know in a hospital, as soon as something is complex for a patient, there are cracks that they can fall through and things start to go wrong. So you need an orchestrated, systematic pathway for patients, which has to be well coordinated and with collaboration between the groups. And I think secondly, funding a new idea, which has been hard to describe, which is one of the reasons why it's taken us so long to get to this point, I think. So to define it and then to describe it in words that grab people's interest, particularly people who have to fund it. But again, I think we're at the point now where we can describe it properly, and the benefits are enormous, not just for individual patients, which is why we're doing it in the first place, but also the savings and the money will fall out of that. But you have to face that problem as well. So I think those two things are critical. And then I suppose thirdly, there's always the individuals who are involved who may or may not see it as their role depending on where they come from. And the other thing is not one particular craft group, if you like. It's got the full range of skills and expertise that needs to do this. So it's really very exciting to work with people of all stripes, if you like, and tribes to get a really great result.
I would assume that the college then is looking at, or if they don't have already, a system for training and qualifications for, perioperative medicine?
Yes, our fellowship, which consists of 5 years of training, has obviously got the academic component as well as the clinical hands-on. Perioperative medicine per se is embedded deeply within that training program. And so everyone can practice perioperative care or perioperative medicine, if you like. But if you want that as your subspecialty, you will need to do some additional expanded training of some sort. So our college is developing a qualification, a diploma of clinical perioperative care. As far as I know, at this stage anyway, it's the only college that provides a clinical diploma in this. And we're busy working through the logistics of it, and I could go into more detail, but essentially it's going to be delivered as a modular type of system because there will be many people coming into it from all different specialties. The people pick up what they need to pick up, and there'll be, of course, recognition of prior learning for the skills that they already have. And that's how we plan to deliver it. So there'll be a clinical component as well as an academic component. And all these things can be gained in many different ways and from many different sources. For people who have just finished their training and just graduated as specialists, it will be far easier for them just to flick straight into prescribed fellowship for I don't know how long to get all the skills and things that are needed. For those of us who've been in practice for a very long time and just need some additional buffing up, if you like, there will be a mechanism for those people to do it as well. And also it'll be open to all, not just to anaesthetists, but also to physicians or anybody, any other specialty as well. And that's part of that collaboration and contribution that we really value with our other colleagues. I mean, anaesthetists are quite good system thinkers, so it's sort of leading it, if you like, but not owning it. This is a team sport. So we're quite a long way down the track. COVID has paused it for a little while, but we're picking it up again and continuing work now from the second half of this year.
Great. And if people want more information about that, Vanessa, where would be the best place to get that?
From the college, email the education unit at ANZCA. Failing that, there's a big steering committee, Perioperative Medicine steering committee, who's chaired by one of our counsellors called Sean McManus, and he has got the oversight of all the streams of work that are associated with this. And one stream is the education stream, and in fact, Joel Simons is on that as well. And Jill's on the group, and Dave Storey is our deputy chair, and Jill Van Ackers on, of course, as the chair of the SIG. So there are a number of people, but the college is the best portal to provide more information.
Great.
So it's education unit at ANZCA.
Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us. That's great. Keep up the good work there.
A pleasure.
Sure. Ross, who's our next guest?
Jackie Close, Professor Jackie Close, is a ortho or a geriatrician, but particularly ortho-geriatrics at the Prince of Wales Hospital, which is one of the major hospitals in Sydney, and at the University of New South Wales. And she's leading a team focused on clinical translation of research in dementia for the acute geriatric setting, but she's also a very active clinician as well.
So many of us have seen the value of geriatric medicine and been hearing a lot more about it and the benefits that it brings to the orthogeriatric setting. But diving right in, how do you see it more broadly in the development of perioperative care?
Well, firstly, thanks for making me part of this team tonight. And certainly in Australia and New Zealand, geriatric medicine has been very much felt to be part of the perioperative medicine family. Yeah, you're right. So orthopedics, so geriatricians have been involved with orthopedics for decades now. But I mean, the model has evolved over time. So it's gone from taking a frail hip fracture patient post-operatively into rehab, into that sort of shared care model, which is common now across many countries. But geriatricians have now started to dip their toe in other surgical specialties. And that's probably been over the last 10 years. The UK has probably been the leader, and the evidence base is expanding. I guess one of the first evidence-based areas to expand was actually to move from emergency orthopedic trauma to planned orthopedic admissions. So that was probably where the first evidence started. But you're now seeing geriatricians venture into general surgery, vascular surgery, urology, cardiothoracics, both in the planned and unplanned part of people's care. What we need to be really careful about, though, is not every single older person needs a geriatrician as part of their perioperative care. Many, many older people have surgery, don't need a geriatrician involved. Their care is already very good. So I think as a specialty, we're trying to work out where do we fit in. And I guess for most of us, we think it's probably in the frail, complex, multimorbid people and those with cognitive impairment. And in terms of what is our role, what is it we do above and beyond what already happens in perioperative care? So I think we often have a role in decision-making, and particularly around limits of care for some of the frailest older people, optimization in advance of a surgical procedure, prevention of post-operative complications, that functional recovery, trying to expedite the functional recovery, and then, of course, discharge planning, as Vanessa says, integrating back into primary care is absolutely crucial to the role of anybody, really, in that perioperative journey.
Yeah, definitely. Well, in the UK, and I know that Jagdeep Desi was coming to the perioperative SIG meeting, she's done a great deal with her POPs clinic and really getting out there and getting the word out to raise the profile of geriatric medicine. What's happening in Australia and New Zealand to do that? I know you said people are starting to dip their toes into other things.
Yeah, look, Jagdeep has done fantastic stuff. I've known Jagdeep for 20 years. So in terms of what's going on in Australia, so we are absolutely behind the UK. We're very aware of that. But we're also learning from the UK, from Jagdeep and from other centres. So there are pockets of good practice in Australia, a lot of innovation going on. Most states, and including New Zealand, are doing something. It's driven still by the enthusiasts. The models that are evolving are different. And what it isn't at this point in time is systematised. So if you look at what Jagdeep has achieved over time, She started small, had a clear model of care, implemented the model of care, evaluated the model of care, demonstrated that it was successful, and then got it resourced and moved on to the next area. So it's taken her a decade to get to where she's got to now, but she has been systematic in her approach, and that's what we need to do in Australia as well. So it is actually incumbent upon all of us who are developing models of care to actually start to demonstrate the value if we have any chance of successfully getting these services resourced. And the last thing we want to be doing is, of course, over-servicing people as well. So we're aware of that. What I would say to support the Periop SIG, I know Jill's talked about it, it has significantly advanced the conversations in perioperative medicine, and geriatricians have been made very welcome at that meeting, and it's probably one of the highlights for many of us on an annual basis. What we're now starting to see is more and more geriatric medicine trainees interested in perioperative medicine and turning up to that meeting on an annual basis. So I'm pleased to hear that whilst we miss out on the Gold Coast, there will be something later on in the year.
Lastly, I know that you have a clinical role, but you're also an active researcher. So where do you see this going as a perioperative model of care develops to become the normal way of doing things?
I think from a research perspective, we need to put some formal and robust evaluation around the intervention. So a lot of what happens in geriatric medicine is not like a drug trial where you give drug X and look for response B. They're usually complex interventions, but there is robust methodology out there to evaluate these complex interventions. So from a research perspective, we really do need to focus on these proper evaluations. And likewise, you can watch what Jagdeep and other colleagues are doing in the UK. That's within the NHS context. Our healthcare context in Australia and New Zealand are different, and Australia and New Zealand are different in terms of the way these services are funded, etc. So even if we're trying to adapt something that's worked in another country, we really do need to be evaluating it in the Australian or New Zealand context. And I know Dave Storey is going to talk about clinical trials platforms, but geriatric medicine needs to think about how it looks at perhaps involving some of our work in terms of the clinical trials platforms, and also having a minimum common data set. So yes, it's great that people are setting up services, but everybody's evaluating their services in different ways. If we had a minimum data set that would facilitate some more collaboration and being able to compare, that would be useful as well. So they're just a few ideas in terms of the research agenda.
Ross, you seemed excited about what Jackie was saying.
I was really biting my tongue to stop myself cheering and confusing the audio when she talking about the minimum data set. I think that is such a no-brainer about the way forward. Our next guest is David Storey, who's the professor and chair at the University of Melbourne and an anaesthetist at the Austin Hospital, which is one of the major hospitals in Melbourne. He's head of the ANZCA, that's the Australian New Zealand College of Anaesthetists Clinical Trials Network. And we've really managed to, for a relatively small population, we really punch well above our weight as a result of the ANZCA CTN, and I think David's got a lot to tell us.
As much as I'd hate to correct Ross, I do need to say that I've previously been chair of the CTN. I'll talk about that in a moment, but the current chair is Andrew Davidson, who's from our Royal Children's Hospital, is in fact a leading paediatric researcher. And that's important because one of the areas where the CTN that has traditionally looked at adult perioperative medicine is now moving to other areas, and having Andrew and a colleague Britta in Perth bringing paediatric research into our realm more frequently and more extensively, I think is very important.
Well, Dave, I know that you're also, in addition to the work that you've done in the CTN, been involved with the International Board of Perioperative Medicine, or you're representing Australia in that group. That's one of the things that we tonight are talking about, is the International Board, and promoting and making sure we get the word out there about that, being involved in the international organization.
Yeah, I think international collaboration is one of the keys, and one of the things, the Clinical Trials Network, although it is, predominantly has been focused on research in Australia and New Zealand, the importance of our international links and international collaborations has been incredibly important. A lot of it has been through PJ Devereux in Canada, but also through colleagues, through Europe, other places in North America and the UK in particular, I think have been very important in the success of the CTN.
Yeah.
So,
Dave, tell us a little.
Where
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Well, what I was going to say was, if we look at the CTN and what it is, so it's CTN is Clinical Trials Network, and in fact we're about to celebrate 20 years since the first major publication from the Clinical Trials Network, which was the master trial comparing patients having major abdominal surgery getting an epidural or not. And I think the importance of that study was, it was published in a major non-anaesthesia journal, being the Lancet, but also that it importantly disproved what was the common belief. At that point, everyone thought that an epidural was the best thing since sliced bread, and that every patient should get an epidural. And in fact, contrary to the hypothesis, that was not the finding. And so the importance of that study is that it was a pragmatic study looking at important questions, and actually found not what we expected, but that we found something else. So that's 20 years ago. And since then, the Clinical Trials Network was really focused on our colleagues in intensive care in Australia and New Zealand have had an amazing track record, and we learned a lot from them. And in fact, now we've come full circle and are collaborating very closely with them in some of our more recent studies, such as the RELIEF study looking at fluids. So we've got a long track record of increasingly complex, collaborative, multi-centre international trials that are answering big questions. And so for the CTN, that's been a really important achievement, and we do very much feel that as a relatively small countries in the South Pacific, we're doing pretty well.
Yeah. Well, tell us how the CTN is different from other multi-center research groups internationally.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is that the CTN is within the College of Anaesthetists. And so we have the Clinical Trials Network, which answers to the Research Committee, which then answers to Council. I think the enormous advantage that brings is that we all belong to one institution. So we don't have that competitive nature. I mean, those of us who belong to the various universities are keen to sort of try and acquire the grants, but the actual research is done under the auspices of the CTN, which is part of the college. And so there aren't those rivalries. I mean, our countries are very egalitarian or pride ourselves on being egalitarian. And I think we're good at collaboration. But being part of the college I think we're the only major trials network that's part of a single organisation, really made a very big difference to how we work. And as part of that, we've reached out to our trial coordinators, many of whom are nurses, often from a critical care background, and create a subcommittee within the college. So we now have a group of predominantly nurses who belong to the subcommittee of the college and feel that's given a very inclusive feeling for them, and they've created their own network. And I think that has also built up the strength of the collaborations. I call it the Ocean's 11 approach. You recognise that you need experts. I think the fundamental mistake that people make is to assume that colleagues such as biostatisticians and health economists are providing a service. They're colleagues who are collaborating with you as equals. And I think that's something we learned very early. And, Andrew Forbes, who's at Monash and has worked very close with Paul Miles, has been a major player. And there are other statisticians around Australia and New Zealand, including Chris Frampton in New Zealand, who have played a major role in the strength of our studies. But part of it has been that those people are treated as colleagues. And Jackie's now talking about is to work with, as we expand the area that we're working in, particularly outside the operating room, to work closely with experts in the different disciplines, be it geriatric medicine or physiotherapy or nursing, and work with them as equals and colleagues in developing the protocols. I think because the next big step is increasingly into health services research and implementation science. The big international problem is we get great research findings, but how do we actually get clinicians to adopt that? Yeah. And there's a growing science around that, both to measure what's happening and how to study it. And I think that's part of the future of where we're going.
Lastly, Joel, tell us what's on the horizon for CTN. What should we expect over the next year or so? I know with COVID, things maybe have been, taking a hit a little bit, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the next big thing, we just finished the PADDY study, which is 8,000 patients looking at the effect of dexamethasone on perioperative infection. Those results are in, and a manuscript is currently being prepared, so that's going to be our next big achievement. The two major ongoing studies at the moment are the ROCKET trial looking at chronic post-surgical pain and the role of ketamine, and then the VAPOR-C study looking at propofol and sevoflurane and cancer outcomes. So both those studies have gone into hibernation a bit with COVID, but as most people know, Australia and particularly New Zealand have done very well in the COVID crisis. We've been lucky and probably partly saved by our geography. And then I think these new areas of research, so Professor Jenny Weller, who's in New Zealand, is leading a new group within the college around professional practice, which I think will lead well into implementation science. And there's some good work coming out. And one of the things, looking at the broader collaborations, we have a fellow of the college who's actually a gynecologist, and she's recently received federal funding to look at pelvic pain in young girls and adolescents around endometriosis. So that's the college underneath us and our Faculty of Pain Medicine really expanding our horizons with experts in other areas.
Fantastic work. Thank you so much, Dave, and look forward to talking to you in the future and see what's happening with the CTN. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Desiree.
Ross, we have one more guest. Yes.
Look, I've got to take issue with Dave. Yes, you know that we as individuals have been very lucky to be living in a country where we've been lucky so far with regard to COVID, but it hasn't just been luck, it's been smart as well. And, we have had our politicians for once have listened to the scientists and the experts and have done what they've been advised mostly, and we've got the benefits of it. And hopefully we'll get the message out there that sometimes science and expertise counts. But, okay, that was great. So now our final guest, so to speak, is Joel Simons. And Joel is an anaesthetist at the Alfred, which is one of the other major hospitals in Melbourne. And all the hospitals in Melbourne think that they're better than everybody else, particularly the Alfred and Melbourne. And Joel's also at Monash University. But Joel's real contribution has been a leader in the development of educational programs based at Monash, but now spreading around the world in perioperative medicine, and has done some fantastic work there. So,
Joel, you are kind of known for that, an educator in perioperative medicine. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing with education in perioperative medicine right now.
The first lesson I learned in perioperative medicine education is don't walk into Paul Miles, who's my boss. Don't walk into his office and ask if you can help him with something. Because I did that in 2008, and he said, sure, I want to set up a perioperative medicine education program. Can you do it? That's where my journey in perioperative medicine education started in 2008, where Paul and I put together the first syllabus in perioperative medicine in the world. That quickly morphed into a perioperative medicine short course, which we initially ran face-to-face in 2009 and then went online the following year. That grew to about 200 to 300 participants a year, and it's delivered entirely online. Eventually, we set up the first Master of Medicine in Perioperative Medicine through Monash University, which commenced in 2013, and that's been going really well since then. When we set up this education program, exactly like Vanessa and Dave and Jill said before, perioperative medicine is about collaboration. And the same way as we collaborate with perioperative medicine clinically, I was hell-bent on involving all specialties and all players in perioperative medicine in the education offering as well. So when we started the short course in perioperative medicine, we involved all types of clinicians. We involved surgeons, intensivists, physicians, geriatricians, sleep specialists. They've all been involved from day dot in delivering content, and we heavily rely on their expertise.
And what sort of response have you had from those groups being involved and, people taking those courses? Have you had a lot of people interested in that?
The response has been overwhelming. Our short course in particular fills up pretty quickly within weeks. It's good having an online course because we're not really capped. But with our short course, we do run a one-day face-to-face component, which is limited to 60 to 65 people, and that fills up within days. Our master's program, which runs over 18 months full-time, we have about 40 students a year doing that. And then along the way, we've also published a textbook called Perioperative Medicine for the Junior Clinician, published in 2015, and that was really the first time that we were able to collaborate internationally as well. So we've got a whole lot of authors from worldwide, especially from UCL and from the States as well.
I know you are on the education committee or group for the International Board of Perioperative Medicine. So can you tell us a little bit about the initiatives that are happening through that organization?
Yeah, the International Board of Perioperative Medicine was formally set up at the ASA 2 years ago in San Francisco. And my role in that, together with David Walker from UCL, is to set up an international perioperative medicine syllabus. Dave Walker, who's my counterpart at UCL and runs the masters there, it soon became apparent that we were approaching perioperative medicine education from two very different angles. And UCL was more general about their approach. We were more specific, but both of those approaches were actually the correct approaches. We decided that we had to collaborate internationally in order to set up an international perioperative medicine syllabus. On the advice of, once again, Paul, Monty Mython, Mark Brocott, Dave Walker and I, together with a whole group of other people, set up the international board, and we have developed a common syllabus in perioperative medicine, which is applicable internationally.
So lastly, Joel, can you tell us what is next on the educational front? Where we see things moving along, and especially now that COVID has impacted life, how do you see all of that working together?
We actually one step ahead of COVID in terms of education, because we're not limited by face-to-face meetings for perioperative medicine education. So most of our education is actually run online, in line with the desire to collaborate not only clinically, we are now collaborating internationally. And very excited to bring to everyone the inaugural Perioperative Medicine short course, which is going to be run jointly with Monash University and University College London. It commences on the 21st of September this year. It's run as a 6-week online course, usually about 6 or 8 hours of work a week. As I said before, run entirely online. What makes this very, very exciting is that we decided that perioperative medicine education should not only be available to developed countries, but should also be available to low-income countries and middle-income countries as well. So to that end, we have a sliding scale for registration fees where people from middle-income countries only pay half the fee, and it's free for low-income countries. So really achieving our dream of bringing perioperative medicine education to everyone worldwide, irrespective of socioeconomic status.
If people want more information about any of those initiatives, the short courses, where's the best place to find all of that? periopmedicine.org.uk. If you want to look at the International Perioperative Medicine syllabus, just hop onto the International Board Perioperative Medicine site, which is ipom.org. Joel, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Again, like everyone else, I can't wait to catch up with you in the future to hear about all the work that you've been doing and how the short course goes. Excited to hear about that.
Likewise, thank you.
Joel, thanks for that, and thanks for all the work that you've done and maintaining that ongoing commitment and that vision to intellectual generosity and sharing it around the world. It really is inspiring. To
all those around the world, thank you so much for joining us here in the Down Under, Australia, New Zealand, a view of perioperative care here, and look forward to future conversations. We're going to do this again. I'm sure it's going to be a huge success. We'll definitely be touching base with everybody, and thank you so much for listening. Ross, Joel, everyone, thanks so much.
Thanks for downloading TopMedTalk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.